Good evening. I'm Kavisha Vilakkamua. On behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, I would like to welcome you to the webinar on Leading in a High Performance Culture. Leading in a high performance culture is critical in organizations that have been tested with transformational change and highly diverse cultures. High performing cultures need leaders who possess the skills to develop and sustain everyone around them. Our speaker for this evening is Mr. Ishan Dantanarayana. Mr. Dantanarayana holds a PhD, an MBA, and he's a chartered marketer, FCIM UK, and has postgraduate HR and marketing qualifications. He's the Group Chief People Officer of Brandix, overlooking global HR. He's also a member of the Brandix leadership team, overlooking overall business and operations in Sri Lanka and go global across the group. He has 31 years of human resources and business partnering experience at senior management level and has trained nationals in over 40 countries. Currently, Mr. Ishan Dantanarayana is the president of the Association of HR Professionals in Sri Lanka, a director of Hotel Developers Lanka PLC Hilton Hotels, an advisory committee member of Ministry of Urban Development, Coast Conservation, Waste Disposal and Public Sanitation. Also a board member of Skill Development Fund. He serves in ISEC Advisory Board as well. We have allocated a time towards the end for the questions of the audience. So please type your questions on the Q&A section for the convenience of the speaker. So without a further delay, I would like to invite Mr. Dantanarayana to take over. Mr. Dantanarayana, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I everyone and welcome to all of you. It's actually a pleasure to be talking to those of you from the Institute of Chartered Accountants. I'll share my screen with you because there are a few slides. I have only about 8 slides, so it's not a lot that I will take you through. Do you see my slides? Kavisha, do you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So today the topic is leading in a high performance culture. So before I start, I thought, most accountants that I know are quite serious. So I thought I'll start with a story. So there was this set of people that I met, actually 6 of them, many years back, about 2 decades back, I think about 20 years back. And that time there was one leader and a set of 5 people who were starting up this company. It's a real estate company and they're really big today. Started small, like I said, but has grown tremendously. So when I used to, when I want to buy a land or an apartment or something like that, I used to always go there and get some input from them. And I used to be going there over the last couple of years. And couple of years when I went back, and even before that, I used to always see as soon as you enter, the receptionist is smiling. They are all very friendly. They are all, like giggling, shouting, talking, and very vibrant atmosphere. And I used to also enjoy, and I used to talk to many people there. So I knew many people in sales, to finance, to legal, lots of them that I knew. So over the time, and after COVID, just before COVID, none of us were going here and there. And about 2 years before COVID, I couldn't go there. But after COVID, recently, I went to that organization. So when you enter that organization, they have a big notice which is a recognition given by one of the organizations, a global organization that calls about employee delight. So they're having that's a award you get for high employee delight. But something that I saw was the receptionist has changed. Uh, then when I went up, the normal, the shouting, smiling that people walking here and there was no longer there. They seem very serious. When I wanted to know something, they were just mostly to the point kind of thing, and that extra chatter, that vibrance was not there. So then when I spoke to one or two, I asked what had happened. So then I got to know that there has been changes in the leadership with the company growing, and now things have changed a lot. So I'll take you this story to my next slide, which is now when I entered the organization, what I felt is what I call the culture in the organization. Because culture is the pulse that you feel when you enter an organization. It's common to anywhere, right? So you immediately know whether this is a very vibrant place, whether this is a very serious place, whether employees here are very interactive. All that you can almost feel when you enter an organization. So that's what I felt. Now then culture can differ across organizations, and it can also have subcultures. So within even that organization that I was speaking to you about, there was one small team who have not changed, and I saw that they still seem to be very close to what they were. But so that's a subculture, whereas the overall organization culture has changed. Now, when organizations evolve, the cultures can change because with as lots of new people come in, you put up processes, you put up policies, the culture can change. But there can be with these policies, processes, and all that also, but you can still sustain the culture by doing various stuff and seeing that you continue with it. But in this organization, the culture has changed, they have evolved. Now, like I told you all, the small team, which has not virtually changed, that's also because the leader there is the same and the team there is the same. So in culture, something that happens is the leaders have a huge impact on culture. So culture will be the shadow of a leader. Like when I went to Google in the US, I saw the CEO there, wearing a skinny, virtually bare-bodied kind of thing and playing basketball. Everyone was very vibrant. They had so many, in their canteen, they had so many sections, various types of cuisine, the Chinese, the Indian, the Mexican, and, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of sports that they could do. There was only one section which was not accessible to anyone. That was their like the research center, which they have set up with their best brains, and that area is not accessible. Other than that, it seemed a very freely moving atmosphere. So that's the culture. That's the shadow of the leaders there. Then I went to Microsoft. Microsoft had a very professional culture, but they were very formal culture. So these are the differences. So leaders can create the culture of an organization. So example, if a leader gives a lot of access to employees at all levels, then the culture will be a very non-hierarchical culture. So now example at Brandix, we have given access to anyone at any level. Now our associates in the plants can have my phone number and my group CEO Ashraf's phone number that they can call on. These are our mobile numbers. So because what we believe in is that everyone has to have access to all levels of leadership directly. So culture becomes the shadow of a leader. Then culture is also impacted by the values. Now, talking about values, in an organization, it's very critical that the values are really understood by the employees and the leadership, and the values are lived by the employees and the leadership. Now, if you take us, and this happens to many organizations, sometimes you go to an organization and ask, do you tell me your values? Then, the team members are thinking, okay, what are values? They remember the full thing or they remember part of it, but some remember less of it. So many years back, we were also like that at Brandix. The values, we had posters, but not everyone could, press, like immediately say it. So what we did was we call it right. We changed our values. We call it right: respect, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. So right, everyone remembers. Everyone after the induction who is joining, those who are joining anew, right after the induction, also they know our values, which is right. So we created that acronym for the reason that everyone remembers, because to live your values, you have to remember your values. And when you remember your values, what happens is, say, if someone is not living it, now respect is a value at Brandix. So if someone is shouting at someone, anyone can walk up to and say, hey, this is not right, because, you're not living our values. We have a value called respect, and you can't be shouting at anyone. That happens because everyone remembers. But like I said before, values is also how the leaders drive it. So example, when the values are infringed, there has to be some consequence. And that consequence cannot be different to levels in the hierarchy. So that's why values have an impact on the culture. Then culture impacts employees, because culture is something, like I told before, is something that, when we enter an organization, we see similarly employees coming into an organization immediately feels and is impacted by the culture. So culture has a correlation, a very strong correlation with performance, because culture is what the employee feels, and how employees feel has a direct impact on performance. So if you want to create an organization which has a high performance culture, you have to see whether your culture is conducive to what the employees aspire to, or is conducive to the right values, or connected with the right values. So that's why I say there's a strong correlation between culture and performance. Then in terms of opportunities, mainly the opportunity cost. Motivation and performance, there is a strong link there. Now, when we talk about, so if we take first about, talk about performance, in all our organizations, we will have goals. So goals, again, what we say is, when you're setting your goals, don't have too many, because when you have too many goals, you can't focus on what you want to achieve. That's one. And if you have goals, a few goals, everyone knows what to achieve, and everyone is very clear about it. So typical method of, there are various methods of setting goals. Now, if you take Hoshin Kanri, for example, that's where, you set up the goals. It's like a funneling technique. You set up the CEO goals, then you go on to the next level of leadership, and so on and so forth. Then goals can be a system like Hoshin Kanri, or goals can be a very simple document where, management takes some decisions and say, okay, these are the goals that we are trying to achieve for the current financial year. So you will have your goals to drive your performance. Then when you have your goals, you will have the action steps, which is you will have your key performance indicators which measure your progress. Then you will have the progress tracking methods. You will have, where you're continuously evaluating your process to drive excellence in that achievement. Then you will also be sharing best practices, so that, achievements can be improved. Because what happens is sometimes, particularly when you're across this, particularly happens in conglomerates and where companies are working as individual companies. So there can be a best practice that is adopted in one company in a group, but that cannot, maybe that's not adopted or known as a best practice by the other organization. But if this can be shared, then a lot of economic benefit can be gained, because like enhancing scale, productivity, progress. So that sharing best practices becomes an action step in terms of achieving performance. Then you have your goals and you have your action steps, then you have your outcomes. So outcomes are your achievements, your profits, your growth. So you will have all this connected with your performance. Then performance is also directly connected with motivation. Talking about motivation, feedback becomes very important, because feedback is a tool that employees need, or the leadership, or it's a two-way process, right? So feedback can be from employee, the superior to the employee, or the team member to the superior. It can be both ways, but feedback is important. If I ask you the question, like, okay, right after all of your companies, you will have a performance cycle. Right after your performance cycle, how much feedback do you get? And what do you feel after that feedback? Do you feel like really inspired, that, you feel really delighted, or you feel as if, you're now completely energized to achieve the next goal? Or do you feel like, oh, I did so much, but this is what I get in return? No one recognizes, no one appreciates. So which are those feelings you get? So feedback can be a motivating factor if it's given properly. It can be very inspiring. It can create a lot of delight. Then in terms of motivation, there is also career progression that everyone wants to look up to. When we say career progression, here what everyone will look at is maybe not only the vertical growth, going up in the hierarchy, but also the horizontal growth, where you're feeling that, you're learning new things, you're adding value to yourself, you're expanding on your knowledge, you're expanding on the awareness that you have across, things like that. And then that you will also evaluate from a perspective of how much have I learned, how much has the company invested in me, in my learning. So learning becomes a critical element, because today there is a lot that we all have to do in terms of learning and unlearning. When you talk about learning, the Coursera studies that the World Bank did shows that most of the things that we are learning today will not be there in a couple of years' time, because it's continuously changing, and the latest things that are emerging is like more than the technical areas, things like mindfulness, empathy. Learning on those things are really gathering a lot of momentum in the world today. And with the new way of working from home, this becomes even more critical, because say all of us are working from home. Earlier, when you say something in front of a face to someone, then the receiving party knows the intent. You can almost judge the intentions. You can witness the body language. You can really understand the context. But sometimes when you're working virtually, you can't understand the context to that extent. So that's why that learning new ways of communication, all that becomes very critical. So all of us, there is a lot to learn and unlearn and relearn. But having these opportunities to learn, unlearn, and relearn creates a lot of motivation, because, like I said, we are feeling that we are adding value to ourselves. Then another thing that motivates is the respect that everyone gets. Now, today, when we talk about respect, we talk about the diversity, the glass ceiling, and all that, which are very, very, very strong today and needs a lot of attention. I mean, diversity is coming into the forefront. Diversity in terms of gender and various orientations, in terms of cultural differences, in terms of global differences. So that diversity and all that becomes very critical. And to to be enable that, respecting each other becomes very critical, and an organization where everyone is respected. Then today, lots of, especially the new generation of Y Z and all that, are really looking at the holistic well-being. It's not only your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your spiritual well-being, all that. So does this organization provide this for one to get motivated? Another area that really motivation, creation, and impact can happen is in the areas, like I said, values, the culture, and the reporting managers, and the security and the safety that someone feels in an organization. Now, when you say security and safety, it's not only the physical security and safety. It is the security and safety too, because where we can put out our vulnerabilities and share with a friend in the organization, where you have a friend to confide in, and you trust that person not to harm you, not to say bad things about you, not to do corridor talk about you, and respect that confidentiality that you have said. So that security of sense of security and safety of being amongst friends, being amongst colleagues who are close to each other, who won't let down each other, that also is a core element of motivation. So performance is impacted by motivation. Now, motivation is impacted by your emotions, how you feel. Do you feel happy working in this organization? Do you feel as if it's a waste of time? Do you feel that you're there because you can't change your job? Or do you feel that you have found the wrong vocation in life? Example, you actually wanted to be an artist, but you are almost drawn to be a finance person, or is that the right job for you? Now, for me, I was initially studying finance, and then I realized that no, I preferred the HR and marketing, so I shifted. So maybe if I was in finance, I love numbers. Don't get me wrong, I love numbers, but sometimes maybe that I wouldn't have been as happy as I am today. So the emotions that run through, and when you're really happy, that creates a lot of passion and commitment and drive towards getting those outcomes. Like they say, if you're really happy with your work, you actually don't feel as if you're working. Going to work or starting on something is always like comes naturally. You're very enthusiastic about it. So motivation, and the motivation is impacted by your emotions, that drives your passion and commitment, and that drives an outcome. And all this, sometimes the maximum output that you could get, it's not known. It's completely not known. It's like, that's what I call an opportunity cost. Example, you go to an artist and you show him a picture and say, okay, I think I like your art. And then you ask, can you draw a similar art for me? And maybe the artist will say, let's say the artist said yes. And then you ask him, okay, what's the cost? Then he says, let's say 20,000 rupees for this art. Oh, I can't be spending 20,000. I don't think it's worth so much. I want something much lesser. So can you do something for 7,000 bucks? So let's say the artist did it. And when you got the art, so you might think, wow, this is a wonderful art. Now, if you ask the artist, maybe for that price reduction, the artist still felt fully motivated and wanted to impress, and he gave his best and gave you the beautiful art that you are now admiring. Or maybe the artist thought, I can't be giving my best to this, because for this amount of things, it's like slave labor for me. I don't want to give my best, so I'm drawing what I want to draw, but my capacity to draw something better is much more. Now that much more is known only by me as the artist and not by the person purchasing my art. So performance is also like that. We might think that an employee is performing to a max, but the employee must be thinking, I'm just giving my, I'm giving the least or to a level that I could, but I could give much more. That's why now if you look at surveys, especially these employee surveys and ask, okay, tell me, can you take on more? More surveys say yes. So there we have to see, okay, that is the opportunity cost that is not seen. So it's a leader's capacity to motivate people to minimize that opportunity cost so that you gain the best potential to drive the highest performance. So there is motivation and performance has a very close connection, and these drive business results. Business results such as creativity, innovation, the agility in organizations where organizations can quickly adapt. We all know how technology companies, some have really grown, some have really gone down. Kodak was many years back a huge company, completely went into a mess. There are so many examples like that in the world, and there is so many examples of companies that have really grown and innovated. Now, example, when my boss bought the Tesla car many years back and bought it down, flew down to Sri Lanka. When I went and looked at it, it was just, it doesn't have an engine. It has a small battery. Now, for the Tesla owner to embark on something like that, where people are used to opening the bonnet and seeing a big engine and seeing a big boot, all that, and changing that to see just a basic battery, that's a huge, very creative thinking with a lot of innovation. But to see where he is today, he's become one of the world's richest men because of that capacity to have that creativity, innovate, and consistently be agile where you can change with time. That's where flexibility come in. When I was at one of the large courier companies before DHL, flexibility was a value because we said couriers will be delivering parcels, but if the necessity arises, even a country manager will go and deliver parcels. And when I was acting country manager, I have actually gone and delivered parcels. So then all this resulted out a lot of insights, and these are what are very critical, as you all know, to being competitive today. And these actually help to drive productivity and sustainability. So there is an opportunity cost in terms of performance and motivation, which are very closely connected. Then in terms of leaders driving high performance, lots of leaders sometimes take on a lot of work, but that it's not the best thing sometimes to do because focus and prioritizing enables you to have the best return on your energy. Return on investment on your energy is best when you have focused and when you on certain initiatives and when you have prioritized. So that's why that's why we say that too many things narrow the capacity, and we have to always look at the 20%, which gives the 80% impact. Then in terms of execution, today execution is key. It's also a team sport because Ram Charan calls it intersections. What he says is, if an intersection breaks, the whole chain breaks. So like that, execute, intersections has to be very strong. For intersections have to be strong, everyone has to know it's a team sport. And it's very critical that leaders have an ear to the ground. I have spoken to many CEOs, and sometimes they say, I want to have a complete restructure of my company. I want to, I'm overstaffed. But when you really, when I really sit down with them and have a discussion, sometimes it's not overstaffed. Sometimes they are understaffed. They need more. People are asking for more. What really is the problem is that your processes have become so cumbersome, or the processes are not connected to one another, and because of that, there is a lot of manual work that is being done, or a lot of repetitive work that is being done, or there is a silo mentality that is there. Because of that, the team that is there is struggling, whereas the boss is thinking that we have too many. Boss at the right top, I mean. So that's why we have to always have a ear to the ground. And don't finish without a closure, because sometimes what happens is, now I'm involved in a lot of public sector institutions. Sometimes a area that I get sometimes little frustrated is because sometimes there is no closure. But if there is no closure, there is no proper execution. So closure becomes important. And something that we will always say is conflicts will be there, and you have to deal with conflicts. When you're dealing with conflicts, there is a system we call centering. This is where when there is a conflict, sometimes when a conflict is discussed, people become personal. So what happens is, if I'm having a conflict, I'm having a discussion with my colleague X, say I'm Y and X. So when X and Y is having a discussion, sometimes things become very personal. So that's why then it leads to conflict. So that's why then it's very important to center, which is to clearly identify what the problem is, and decouple the personalities or the personal traits with this conflict. So that's what we call centering. So when you center, then you're taking off the emotions, you're taking off you and me, and you're looking at the problem. So the surfacing conflicts and resolving them becomes a very critical element for high performance, because high performance is all about speedy execution. And speedy execution cannot happen if there is no connectivity, and if people are having conflicts which are unresolved. So sometimes we say, the elephant is in the room, but we don't talk about it. It's all underneath. We all know the problem, but no one surfaces it. So the problem will continue. So the elephant in the room has to be called out, surfaced, and that has to be dealt with to create a high performance culture. Then in terms of talent, today, it's all global. When we say global, if we want to hire someone today for most functions, we can hire from anyone from any part of the world, and they can be working from anywhere in the world, because like we are working from home most of the time. Anywhere, location doesn't matter. And today with teams, and example in teams, and with all these small breakout rooms where even a smaller team can connect further closely. So world has become a global talent pool. You can work for anyone anywhere. I know enough people, especially with my Virtusa background, when I was heading Virtusa for Sri Lanka, Asia, and Europe. I know how many people telecommute and work online. So there is a lot of work that you can do online. So talent becomes a global pool. In a situation like that, talent and careers should be the ownership should be owned by all the leaders in the organization. These leaders should be actively engaged in the performance to drive a high performance culture. Now, I'll quote an example. Many years back, how we had at Brandix, how we had the performance evaluation was the SBUs, the numerous companies that we have do their performance. They are collated at the corporate, which is the Brandix headquarters corporate, and then this is presented to the board, and the CEOs and the board members review that, and all the shortcomings are communicated to the corporate team. So right after that was when I joined, and right after the change that we did was, we said no, goals, evaluation of goals, evaluation of performance, and presenting that to the leadership will be the owners of the respective CEOs. These CEOs will be assisted by the HR teams and the line leaders, but the CEOs who will present to the board. When that happened, I'll tell you, the attention, the quality of the goals, attention of the evaluations, attention on the feedback, because the ratings come through, all that completely improved. So that's why the talent should be the owners, not of your HR team, but should be owned by all the leaders in the organization. And when we talk about talent, we can have this, recognition schemes, reward schemes. We have the 9 box, we have the succession. If I can talk hours on these HR process, people evaluation process, assessment centers, and all that. But even though you have all that, what is important to the employee is this a fair process? Because what they will see is this identifying the right people to be recognized and rewarded? So if you want to drive a high performance culture, fairness in managing talent becomes very critical. The next one is if you take most of the high performance organizations, they also have a coaching approach in their culture. They can be, you can have, if you take at Brandix, we have a huge coaching pool certified by the IFC, etc., because we believe completely in coaching. But maybe every organization doesn't have to do that, right? But they can take a very coaching approach, where leaders take a coaching approach which enables and helps to drive performance. Now, when we say coaching approach, it's about coaching the person and not the problem. This is like, giving the fishing rod versus giving the fish. Because when you coach the person, what you do is, when someone comes to you with a problem, say say one of my subordinates come to me with a problem, my first intuition and my first reaction can be to quickly give a solution to that. And I presume that you see that happening very commonly. But if you're taking a coaching approach, what you do is maybe at that moment of time, if you lack time, you can still give the solution and have a subsequent coaching approach. But the ideal coaching approach is where you are asking powerful questions and enabling your subordinate to think that, that subordinate himself or herself finds a solution to the problem. And that way, when you start doing that, initially you'll have them coming to you all the time. But with time, you will realize now they are themselves resolving the problems. But to do that, you have to be able to listen, not just listen, but listen to understand. If you listen to reply, or if you listen to respond, or if you listen to react, then you're not listening to understand. Listening to understand is having an open mind where you don't judge. You don't have any preconceived notions about the person. You completely empathize. And then you completely listen with an open mind to understand what is being told. You will have to, maybe you still won't understand and you will have to probe. You will not have a reply. But that probing, it's what really helps. Now, when I went to Toyota in Kentucky plant, it's in the US, it's a 7.5 million square feet plant. And they say that, if there is any defect, you can pull that tandem that they call it. And when you pull that, the entire production line stops. And anyone who's seeing a mistake can pull that. That level of control is given because that level of empowerment is given, because that way they have the highest quality. To do that, when a quality defect happens, you have to empathize and see, okay, how do you resolve that versus passing that on, or finding, blaming someone for doing that. So a coaching culture takes a very empathetic approach. And also, sometimes you see in organizations that, you are treated as, guilty until proven innocent. It should not be the case. You should be treated as innocent until proven guilty. So a coaching approach creates a lot of conducive environment for everyone to open up and give thoughts, suggestions, and that leads to a high performance culture. High performance cultures also hires top leaders, like GE chairman then said, there are 10 people who are smarter than me, but my task is bring all these collectively smart, all these smart people collectively together. So if you're when in terms of hiring, you have to see that, when you're hiring, that they see the total picture. They don't have a narrow focus, have a very natural attitude that connects people together, where it encourages collaboration. And these are people who can get others to do work for them and others to give their best, who can drive loyalty, transparency, and without any politics. And those who can really get others to grow by giving ideas, providing them exposure. Because, sometimes if some leaders are insecure, they don't want, example, you have a subordinate, you don't want, you're the leader, you don't want your subordinate to speak to your CEO because you feel insecure. So these are not the types of leaders that high-performing organizations hire, because they hire people who will give a subordinate direct access to the CEO, because why? These leaders don't feel insecure. These leaders are confident among themselves. So in a organization that talking about high performance, I thought I'll share some thoughts for high performance for the chartered accountants. That's each of you. I think this is also with my experience. Like I started studying and working together, because when in my era, due to insurgency, the universities were closed, so we had to do foreign exams and go overseas and all that, and then study. So in my 30 plus years of experience, what I have seen in terms of interacting with a lot of accountants, I thought I'll give you some thoughts from me to you. All of you have a very strong in-depth knowledge, especially chartered accountants, where you're completely strong in your accounting. But one area that I think all of you should also see is to see how the rest of the functions work and have a good understanding of those functions and the overall operations as chartered accountants, because that way you'll be able to contribute to a high performing culture. Whilst you look at cost efficiencies, lots of accountants looks at a lot of cost efficiencies, and sometimes because of that you miss the helicopter view and thereby the opportunities that can be grabbed for growth. Now, if you take one of the guys that I have great respect in terms of that helicopter view, it's our former finance director, Trevin Jayasekara, who's like, you go to him, you go with all these numbers, he doesn't look at the numbers, he'll just ask you two questions, which are like, 50,000 feet. And that enables us to always think in very, very diverse manners. So that's the strength of a good leader who sees the 50,000 feet. And another thing is, sometimes in organizations you have KPIs and metrics that are not interlinked, not interconnected. Typically, you see that marketing has an agenda, finance has an agenda, but these two don't really come in sync. So sometimes the marketers think that the finance guys are harsh, finance guys think that the marketing is slack. So that's where the KPIs have to be really connected. What you measure has to be very well connected, and those have to be augmenting and helping each of those functions to grow. Then increase your capacity, because something our chairman always says is that write your resume every 6 months, and in it delete stuff that you think, delete stuff that within that CV, and say these stuff I'm going to delegate. That's one. And add on stuff, so that these stuff that you add on will give you new knowledge, new experience, new thinking, being innovative. So every year, look at what you shed and what you add. Then in terms of your skill, sometimes what happens is, when you are very number driven, I know lots of them like that, analysis paralysis happens, because you're consistently asking for details and then details. And sometimes because of that, you're missing the bus. Because today, the capacity to work in ambiguity with this ever-changing, resolving, transformative VUCA world, and working in ambiguity becomes a very critical element. Then importance of communication. Not everyone can really communicate, right? Some are very introvert, but some of the introverts are the best in terms of knowledge. So there we have to prompt them, ask them questions so that we bring them out and their thoughts come through. And we also have to see how we align the teams, because sometimes teams not being aligned is what is impacting the high performance of an organization. Then assess the real constraints in a very informal way. So sometimes, once again, when I asked Ram Charan because I worked a lot with him personally, when I asked him about what's the best way to improve teamwork and team synergy, he said, go and have some drinks. That's the best way to improve teamwork. It's not about this, outbound training and all that. You create a couple of interactive sessions every Friday with some beers and drinks and like whatever that is. And every time that people meet, they will gel together, come closer together, and create those opportunities where you discuss constraints and find solutions in a very informal manner. And wherever you don't have direct control, keep in mind that you will always have to know whom to reach out to. Where sometimes when we are in a crunch, it's not the leader, it's not the deputy, it's not the third in command. Maybe it's a 10th in the line that has a real knowledge. So we have to know who's a real person who has this expertise in this area. Then you have to know your customers, their needs, and also how they make money. And what we call in marketing, having a USP or a differentiator in terms of quality, delivery, and cost, or all three, or one of them, or more of them, so that you have a differentiator that drives high performance for your organization. Also to know how your customer makes money, because that way you are supporting the customer to make their money, and you're growing your top line and your bottom line. Very critical to know what your company does. I know one large global company which got a lot of competitive information and completely changed their strategy by getting the dustbin cleaners to give the documents that were in dustbins. This is one of the large global companies. So we have to know what your competition does and what the competition provides in terms of value. Then in terms of your own thinking, sometimes when we are so conscious about numbers, cost, impact, revenue, profits, and growth, we sometimes look at when a crunch time comes, the first thing is to look at some organizations, cutting the training budget. Like that. So we have to know that the importance of investing in talent, training, and engagement, because like machines, people also need that attention. So all what you achieve today is if you really think of it, organizations will have capital and access to capital. It will have resources and access to resources, but the differentiator and the final achiever of goals will be your people. And if you look at your internal client delight and create that as a key differentiator and a unique selling proposition, you will always create happy employees creating happy customers. These happy employees creating happy customers is a Japanese proverb. It dates back to year 1565. 1565, and you will see that's even true for today. So I think that I went a little fast towards the end because I want to have some question and answer time. So open to you for any questions, clarifications, anything. Hello.
Ishan, there are two questions that's posted by the audience. Shall I read out the question for you?
Sure.
Yeah. In your example, mentioned first few slides in the presentation, there is relationship between organization culture and change management. How can we deal with type of situation without any interruption of functions of the organization?
Okay, so change management, good question. Change management is something consistent because today what we see is continuous change. When you do change, I mean, this is a topic that I can talk to you for hours, but when you do change, it's very important certain elements that you look at. One thing, how much much you engage your employees and your leadership in this change. What amount of awareness you create, what amount of reasoning you do so that employees understand, okay, and your teams and leaders understand this is why this change is required. Then when you do that change, in the course of that change, how do you respect your values, which is based on your culture. Now I'll give an example. Say that part of a change management can be to restructure a company. So when you restructure, it's very important everyone to know why we are restructuring and the need to restructure so that everyone knows, yes, the restructure is required. Then when you're restructuring, the level of transparency that you have in selecting the employees that you will have to let go becomes a very critical process, because that's one of that should be aligned to your values. And then when you have the exit discussions, with what level of empathy and respect and care that you conduct those discussions becomes a part of your DNA, part of your culture, part of your values. Then once the employees leave, how you support them with, headhunters, all that becomes another element. So you can do change management. I just quoted one example, but I can quote you hundreds. But that's one way to say that, okay, you will go ahead with change management. You have to, because without change, being consistent, you are going to crash. So you have to change, but within that change, how you hold on to your culture and values. It's something that you have to think about and something that you can do.
Thanks, Ishan. There's another question on coaching. While coaching, if the subordinate continuously comes to you for problem solving, how should you approach this situation? For example, if the individual attempts to upward delegate.
Yeah. So when I talk about coaching, I have to also talk about mentoring, which I'll do in a minute. Mentoring is like a sounding board. You go to an employer, you go to a boss or a colleague, and get some views, because that person has more knowledge, experience, exposure than you. When you take a coaching approach, this is where someone is coming to you for input, and you are enabling that person to also find solutions. But if someone is coming to you all the time and asking you questions maybe that's curiosity, maybe it's good. But if someone is coming to you all the time for support in terms of because of a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, then I think you have to look at, first of all, whether you have hired the right person, or whether you have given the right orientation, or whether is there a lack of skill, or whether there is a lack of training, or whether there is a process issue. So you have to look at the reason why this person is coming to you all the time. And the coaching approach will enable you to really ascertain that reason, because you're listening with a mind to understand the real issue, and not providing a solution. You're listening to the employee to understand the real issue, and through that supporting the employee to find a solution. So when that consistently happens, the number of times that person comes to you will drastically reduce. Try that. I'll give you another hint. Like if one of your subordinates comes to you with a problem, tell them to sit down and say, okay, before I give you a solution, can I tell you is there any solutions in your mind that you can think of, and tell me such solutions. That employee may or may not have a solution at that time, but henceforth, every time when you do this, before they come to you, they will always think of a solution. So that might be the solution that you have in mind too, or maybe you have a better solution. But either way, the number of times that person comes to you for a solution will reduce, because now that person itself is thinking of solutions. So when someone comes to you with a problem, ask that question, sit down. Now let me ask you, if you were me, what kind of solutions would you think of?
Thank you. This is a very interesting question. How do you change employees who are not team players? I believe you have a lot of experience.
Yeah. So I think this is where you have to bring the elephant out in the room, right? What really happens is, now someone say that, someone tells something to someone, and this person is not confronting that person and going and telling someone, and there is no solution to that. So I think if someone is not a team player, the first thing that you can do is discuss that. So we call it, there is a process that I call, which I work with Center for Creative Leadership in the US. They are ranked 4th in the world. They are very advanced in their leadership process. They call it SBI, Situation, Behavior, Impact. They say that, if something happens to you, if someone does something, give that feedback to them in terms of SBI. Say, example, when we were at that meeting yesterday, when we had the marketing meeting yesterday, one of our customers shouted at me, but at that moment of time, you spoke up, and that helped the customer to understand the point that I was trying to say better than what I could say. So because of that, I felt very nice about it, and thank you for it. Now that's a positive SBI. You can similarly give a negative SBI. So like that, one is to have that one-on-one. If you can't have that one-on-one, there are processes that you can create in a team where, like everyone gets a little check, and then everyone talks about rights on about that person, and in the end, you read that in public. So you don't know who said what, but it gives feedback to that person to say, okay, this is how people are thinking. Of course, there are technical things like 360-degree surveys and all that you can do, but the most simple process, like Ramcharan said, is if someone is not a good team player, create opportunities to engage that person in a very informal way. With time, that person will change. So a couple of things: informal things, formal things, one-on-ones, SBIs, team feedback. You can do so many stuff to address that. And also, I think there has to be in a team. You can always give back, have some thoughts to say that, okay, these things we will not tolerate as a team.
Thank you. So this question is on high performance. How do you define high performance? Is it only the consistent achievement of targets and budgets, or is there much more to high performance?
No, there is much more to high performance. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah, there is much more to high performance, because performance is something that you have done yesterday and you're doing today, but you don't know how your performance will be in the future. So how your performance will be in the future is reflected by what we call potential. So that's why if you do a 9-box, for example, we have the performance potential grid. In addition to that, there are leadership tools like the Hogan tools, the Harrison tools, things like that, which can give you a leadership capacity and where you need to work on. So in terms of high performance is also not only performance itself, is performance and potential has to come together, and opportunities has to be created to enable to do so. So high performance, and then also the leader's role becomes a very critical one. So high performance is not only about performance, it's your feedback that you get from your 360. It's feedback on your potential. It's the level of creativity and innovativeness you have. It's your capacity to align teams, where is your capacity to collaborate. All those areas where you're becoming a person who can integrate and collaborate. All those things comes in when you talk of high performance. With a high performance, if you promote people only for achievement of goals, and the ratings are only based on goals achievement, and you completely forget about the rest of the soft areas, then I think you're promoting the wrong person and creating the wrong culture.
Thanks, Ishan. I'm concerned about the time, but this particular question, I think most organizations that we are in are doing different things. But given the exposure, I believe we would like to know your views and what you practice as well. So how to motivate the employees in the time of COVID-19? We are in different rosters, working from home. How to keep ourselves motivated while we motivate our teams as well. Your thoughts on that?
So if you talk about exposure, training is only 10%. You know the 70-20-10, 70-20-10 rule. Formal training is only 10%. The rest becomes the exposure, the opportunities, the projects, the feedback. You know, all that opportunities that you create for employees to grow. Now, when we are working from home, and this will be the new way of work, because most organizations will continue to be this way, and employees are preferring this way, and survey input is also giving a lot of feedback to say that they like it. In a situation like that, to create that camaraderie, create that collaboration, create that mental well-being, all that engagement becomes very critical. And today there are lots of tools that you can do to virtually engage employees. There are lots of tools and lots of ways that you can do. So virtually engaging employees becomes very critical. It's also very critical that the bosses have one-on-ones with their employees. So I would ask participants in this organization, if you are a boss, how frequently do you have your one-on-one with your subordinates? And if you're a subordinate, I would ask, okay, how frequently do you have your one-on-one with your boss? So one-on-ones becomes very critical. The level of various, now at Brandix, we have a whole, under HR, I have a whole vertical under mental well-being. So there is a lot of education, mindfulness, stress management, parenting, all those knowledge that can be created to make that working from home a much more enjoyable one, and also set up certain rules. So example, we set up in our work from home, we have a policy called hub, club, home, roam. Hub is those who need to come to work most of the time. Club is where you can work from anywhere. Home is your primarily working from home. Roam is you can work from any location, client side, supplier side, anywhere. So based on those categories, various actions are taken to engage. But there are so many methods that you can use today, and these are becoming very common.
Since we have come to the end of the webinar, I would like to thank our guest speaker today, Mr. Ishan Dantanarayana, for conducting a very interesting, enlightening and informative webinar. There are lots of learning outcomes, points to think that derived from this webinar for our chartered accountants. Thank you very much, Mr. Ishan Dantanarayana, taking your time to conduct this valuable webinar. Also, I would like to thank all the participants present here for making this webinar very interactive session on behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka and on behalf of the CPD committee. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot. I'm very humbled. My pleasure, and thank you.